What you have been calling your weakness is the very thing that makes you a vessel I can fill. Not the polish you keep trying to manufacture. Not the certainty you keep waiting to feel. Not the strength you keep promising yourself you will summon tomorrow. The crack itself. The dent itself. The hollow itself. None of it is what you think it is. Right now, in this very moment, allow me to walk you through why the very ordinariness of the jar you are has always been the qualification for the treasure I want to pour into it. And before this message ends, allow me to set in front of you a single line I had Paul write to a small church across the sea. A line that will hush, in this hour, the precise shame your own efforts have never managed to hush. Stay with me at this counter. We are in no rush. I see you. Your hands have been turning the same small jar over and over, looking for the flaw that makes you unfit for anything beautiful. There is a mother who has been hiding the dent in her patience from her own family because she thinks a real mother does not have one. A husband on the other side of the wall has stopped praying out loud because his voice has begun to sound in his own ears, too cracked to be heard in heaven. A young one who was told that confidence is the qualification for being used has been waiting on a feeling that never arrives. An older one stands in front of the pantry of her own life, embarrassed by how little is in the basin she has left to offer anyone, including me. A widow has measured out the last of her oil one more time and tried not to think about what comes after the bottom. 3 streets over, a single father empties what is left of himself into the lunchbox of his child and lies down at night sure that the rim of his cup is showing. Someone who once carried a vessel of plans and dropped it on a hard year has been picking up shards ever since, certain that broken pottery cannot be useful to anyone. A friend who used to ask how you were doing stopped because the answer was always, still pouring out, not sure for whom. Your morning prayer is shorter because saying the same sentence again has begun to feel like asking for water from a jar that you suspect has nothing left at the bottom. None of you is hidden from me. Not one cracked rim is invisible. Not one empty pitcher is uncounted. Every chip on the edge of your life that you have been hoping no one would notice. I noticed years ago, and I did not flinch. I am not impatient with the chips. I am tender about them. I am not pacing on the other side of the cupboard waiting for you to fix yourself before I will sit at the same table with you. I am the one who reached for this jar on purpose, knowing what it was, knowing what it could not hold, knowing what would need to leak out of it before what I wanted to put inside could finally make it through. That unfitness you have been hiding is not a problem I am working around. It is the doorway I am working through. More lives inside the embarrassment than the obvious part. Quietly, you have been hauling a shame about having less stamina than you used to have. A hidden shock about needing rest in places where you once needed nothing at all. You have been hauling the embarrassment of your own thresholds, how a conversation drains you faster than it used to, how an errand depletes you for reasons that no calendar can explain, how even a small social event costs you a full day of recovery. You have been hauling the secret weariness of comparing your own slow rebuild against the apparent ease of people whose insides you cannot actually see. Such secondary loads were on no list anyone warned you about. Quietly, they climbed onto the rim of the jar while your hands were busy holding the jar steady. Believe me when I say I see those too. They are counted with the rest. Close your eyes for the next few sentences if it is safe where you are. Soften the gaze behind the lids. Do not fix it on anything in particular. Let the inside of your eyelids blur a little at the edges. That small unfocusing is also a kind of opening. Your eyes have been holding the shape of inspection for so long, they have forgotten how to simply receive. Notice as the focus loosens, that something in your jaw unclenches at the same time, and something in your chest sits down. That is what a vessel does when it is no longer trying to prove its worthiness to the cupboard. Cracks are where the light gets in. Cracks are where the love gets out. Stay with that one sentence for the breath you are in. Do not move past it too quickly. That crack you were trying to hide was this whole time exactly the part of you that my light had a way through. You did not learn to be ashamed of being a clay jar all by yourself. You learned it. The first morning a parent told you that crying was a leak, and leaks were embarrassing, and so you welded the small crack of your sorrow shut and have been carrying the seam ever since. You learned it the day a teacher held up another child as the example of the right vessel, and you understood, without anyone saying it, that the shape of you was not the shape that gets chosen. You learned it the season a relationship ended, and someone who had known your cracks decided they were too much to live next to, and you concluded that the cracks themselves must be the reason no one stayed. You learned it in a place of worship where the language for usefulness sounded a lot like Polish, and the language for holiness sounded a lot like ornament, and the language for blessing sounded a lot like never having to admit you were tired or breaking or running low. That language did not come from me. A few of the mouths that spoke it cared about you sincerely and were just forwarding what had been spoken over them. Other mouths borrowed the sound of my name on purpose to keep you striving so they could keep extracting. Either route, the same falsified picture of vessels lodged inside your chest, gleaming, ornate, never chipped, never tired, and that picture was sketched by fingers that were never mine. Set it down for a minute. Prop it against the wall while I describe what my treasure has always actually preferred to live inside of. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that worthiness comes from polish, that the holy jar is the ornate one on the high shelf, set apart from kitchens and dishes and ordinary use, kept behind glass because something so beautiful could not survive contact with a real life. You were taught that the pitcher I will pour through is the one that has been buffed to a shine by enough discipline, enough fasting, enough certainty, enough Sunday mornings without yawning. You were taught that you have to be filled with confidence before I can fill you with anything else, and that an unsure jar is a disqualified jar. That is not how I have ever worked. That has never been how I have worked. Look at the kitchens of the world I most love sitting in. Not the glass shelves, worn counters with crumbs at the edges, a chipped mug some tired hand reaches for at 5 in the morning, a pitcher with a small fracture down the side that someone keeps using because the water still gets where it needs to go. Vessels I have most loved across the centuries were never the ones that impressed visitors. They were the ones that got used until the use itself was a kind of prayer. You have been measuring your fitness for me by the wrong criteria. You have been holding the jar of your life up to the light and checking for shine. I have been holding it up to the light and checking for openings. Those are not the same inspection. A shine inspection disqualifies almost everyone and disqualifies them for the wrong thing. An opening inspection looks for cracks, hollows, places where what is inside can finally pour out without a wall getting in the way. That same crack that fails the first inspection is the precise feature that passes the second. What you call empty is the room I have needed to fill. What you call cracked is the seam through which what I am pouring will finally reach a thirsty world. What you call ordinary is the camouflage that lets the treasure inside be unmistakably mine when people finally see it. A gold jar would have made the gift look like the jar's own brightness. A clay jar makes it impossible to mistake the source. Place your hand at the spot on your sternum where a jar would have a lid. Light pressure. Press the back of that hand gently into the palm of the other, just enough that the two of you feel each other. Whichever hand is on top is the part of you that has been trying to seal yourself shut against further leaks. Whichever hand is underneath is the part of you that has been quietly hoping someone would finally meet you on the inside of your own skin. Let them stay there for a few breaths. Notice that the lower hand does not collapse under the upper one. It simply holds. That is how I am holding you, while you decide whether your cracks are really the problem. You have been treating them as. Allow me to bring you to a sentence I had Paul put down many centuries back, addressed to a small gathering of believers inside a sophisticated Greek city by the name of Corinth. Wicked people they were not. Embarrassed people they were. Their city was crowded with polished orators, charismatic teachers, philosophers who could turn a phrase the way a potter turns a wheel. Bright vessels, everyone, with crowds following at their heels through every market. My believers, receiving this letter, were measuring themselves against all that brightness and shrinking under the comparison. Their own teacher had spoken plainly, appeared plainly, fallen ill often. Their own gatherings remained small. Their own bodies stayed tired. Quietly, in private hours, they had begun to wonder whether they were holding the wrong jar to be entrusted with anything sacred. Picture them for a breath. A small upper room with low light. A handful of believers drawn from every walk of life. A freed slave, a tent maker, a tired mother, a fisherman with cracked hands, a wealthy woman who had given more than she could comfortably afford. Earlier that day, they had walked through markets crowded with impressive teachers and returned to that upper room feeling smaller than when they left. A few had been told by neighbors that their faith was a peasant religion, embarrassing to be associated with in a city of such intellectual brightness. Others were unwell and could not hide the toll of it on their bodies. Yet others had failed in ways the city had not forgotten. Inside that little room, they sat together with one quiet question pressing on the inside of every chest. Did he really mean to choose us? Was there not a brighter assembly somewhere else that would have made better display cases for his treasure? Did the owner of this gospel know what he was doing when he picked vessels so plainly made of clay? That letter arrived. It was read aloud to a room full of believers who had been holding the rim of their own ordinariness with a tight hand. Inside that letter, I handed them, and you, listening from your own ordinary kitchen, your own ordinary morning, your own ordinary tiredness, one sentence to keep close for as long as they would live. This is what I said. 2 Corinthians 4:7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. Sit beside me inside this sentence. Take it slowly. A fast read will miss most of what is buried in the syllables. Treasure. Look at the word. It is not potential treasure. It is not treasure if you behave. It is treasure already inside, already there, placed by me before you knew to ask. What is in your jar is my presence, my word, my spirit, my love alive in the small chambers of who you are. It was not deposited because you were polished. It was deposited because I chose to deposit it. Choice was mine. Vessel was mine to pick. Jars of clay. Read those words a second time. Not crystal, not gold, not ivory. Clay, common, ordinary, fragile, breakable. A kind of jar a household uses for water and then sets back down on a wooden table without ceremony. That is the vessel I chose for what is precious. Not because I had to settle for it, because I preferred it. Because a clay jar is honest about what it is. It does not pretend to be the source. It does not steal the eye away from what is inside. Hear that as I say it directly to the version of you that has been ashamed of being so plain. Plainness was the qualification. Plainness was not the failure. Plainness is what makes the treasure inside readable as treasure when anyone finally looks closely enough to see it. Surpassing power. That word for power, in the original tongue, means the kind that overflows the container without breaking it. What is inside you is moving with that kind of force. You have felt it without having a name for it. Small mercies you have given on a day you had nothing left to give. A kindness that came out of your mouth when you fully expected the opposite. A strength to keep walking through a season that should have stopped you weeks ago. Those moments were not your reserves. Your reserves had been empty for a while. Those moments were my power surpassing the limit of the jar. Belongs to God and not to us. Hear the relief in this line. Treasure is mine. Power is mine. Keeping of it inside the jar is mine. None of that load was ever on you. You were never the one in charge of keeping the precious thing precious. That whole exhausting effort can come down. You are the carrier of something I am responsible for. A carrier is honored. A carrier is loved. A carrier is not the source. As I once said through one of my old prophets to a frightened widow in a famine, the oil in your jar will not run out until the season changes. Let that quiet promise sit beside the sentence Paul wrote. The jar does not run dry because the one who fills it is the one who decides when the famine ends. You have been counting drops because you thought the supply was yours to manage. It is not yours to manage. It is mine to keep flowing. Let that detail settle for a breath. That widow did not stop being a widow. Famine did not lift the morning the prophet arrived at her door. Her jar did not suddenly look like a different jar. What changed was who was paying attention to the level. Until then, the level had been her terror. From then on, the level became mine the moment she handed me the small thing she had left. It has been quietly mine ever since. That is the arrangement I am proposing to your jar in this hour. You hand me the level. I handle the supply. You stop measuring with terror. I start measuring with mercy. Famine outside the window may take its own time to lift. Yet your jar in your kitchen is already under new management. Return for a moment to the promise I offered when this short message began. I told you I would show you why the very ordinariness of the jar you are has always been the qualification for the treasure I want to pour into it. Here, then, is the answer. Because a treasure inside a glittering vessel gets confused with the vessel. A treasure inside a jar of clay can only be me. Whole purpose of your plainness, your cracks, your dents, your hollow places, was that no one looking at your life, including you, would mistake what is happening inside it for something you achieved on your own. Treasure has always been credited to the right owner precisely because your jar has always been honest about being a jar. Take this small practice with you into the rhythm of your days, while a deeper unloading takes its slower time. Whenever shame about a crack shows up next, and it will, since that lie about needing polish to be useful has lived in your wiring for years, pause and put one question to the jar. Is this vessel capable of holding what he wants to pour through it? Answer is yes. Always yes. A crack does not disqualify the jar. A crack is one of the routes the pouring gets out. A dent does not unfit the cup. A dent is where the table now recognizes the cup as yours. A second beat exists inside this small practice. Once you ask the question, and an affirmative reply comes back, refuse the urge to march onward. Linger in the yes for a breath beyond what feels comfortable. Many of you will sprint past relief because relief is a territory you have not inhabited. Permit that yes to settle along the rim of you. Longer it is allowed to sit there, more your hands learn that they were never the ones holding what is sacred inside you. A third beat, gentler than the other two. When you notice you have poured something good into another person's day, do not rush to take credit for it. Whisper instead in whatever voice you can manage, "That was the treasure, not the jar." That single line is a whole posture. It returns the brightness to the right owner. It keeps the jar honest. It protects you from the slow ache of believing you have to keep being the source of your own supply. A small afterstep is worth adding once you have the bandwidth for it. Following the whisper, draw one slow breath and let the out-breath be longer than the in-breath. Bodies absorb more from a slow out-breath than from any well-crafted sermon. Your nervous system has been running on in-breaths for years, bracing, holding, gathering, gripping, because it has assumed the supply might run dry at any moment, and a wise vessel hoards what it has. A slow out-breath teaches the jar that the supply is not in danger. A slow out-breath tells the lid it is allowed to remain loose. A slow out-breath is the smallest possible trust prayer there is, and it arrives at my ear precisely as fully as the longest one ever does. And finally, when comparison arrives, and it will, because polished jars on a glowing screen will not stop appearing in front of you, do not argue with the comparison. Simply ask it one quiet question. Whose treasure is this jar carrying? Comparison cannot answer that question because comparison was only ever looking at the outside of vessels. Your question redirects the eye to the only thing that matters about a jar. Let comparison wander off without an answer, the way a confused merchant wanders off from a stall that is selling something he was not actually shopping for. You were never in the market for a different jar. You were always in the market for the right owner of the jar you already are. No transformation tends to arrive on attempt number one. Shame about cracks has been a roommate of yours for many seasons, and roommates rarely move out the afternoon you ask them to. After the 10th repetition of asking the jar the question and letting the yes settle, however, register the shift. Shame will start taking longer to arrive in the morning. Past the 30th repetition, register the further shift. You will have stopped reaching for the polish reflexively whenever someone gets close enough to see the dent. Past the 50th, register again. People who stayed near you have stayed not in spite of the cracks, but because something about your particular jar makes its treasure recognizable to them in a way the polished ones never were. Past the 100th, glance at your own life and grasp that your cracks were never the wound. They were the root. To the one who once tried to bring a broken jar to me and walked away, convinced nothing was different because nothing in the jar looked changed. Hear me. Pouring happens slower than the eye registers. Filling does not announce itself the way emptying does. A night when the supply gets refilled is almost always a night with no fireworks. You may have spent years assuming nothing was happening only because the level rose so quietly. Bring the jar again. Set it down on the counter between us. My faucet has not been turned off. You only needed a different angle to see that the water has been arriving the whole time. To the one who is comparing the jar in your hands to the brighter jars on the screens of your phone, set the phone face down for the remainder of this message. Those bright jars are not your competition. They are a different kitchen, a different table, a different meal, in a different season. Brightness on the surface tells you almost nothing about what is inside. Some of the most polished vessels in your feed are empty. Some of the most plain-looking vessels you walk past every day are overflowing with what only the close ones will ever taste. Measure of your jar is not its shine. Measure of your jar is what passes through it when you let me do the pouring. To the one whose jar feels not only chipped, but smashed, a marriage that ended, a body that broke, a dream that shattered, a trust that splintered. Hear this last word before I close. Smashed pottery in my workshop is not trash. It is raw material I begin again with. I've always preferred to build with broken shards rather than with intact vessels, because shards know they cannot hold anything on their own, and that knowing is the beginning of being useful in the right way. Bring me the pile. Do not arrange it neatly. Do not try to glue it back into the shape it used to have. I am making something new out of what you have decided was finished. Whichever piece of you that you are most ashamed of being broken is the piece I am most likely to set at the very mouth of the new jar, so that what pours out of you next goes through exactly the place you thought disqualified you. To the parent who has been watching a child go through their own season of cracks, hear this too. Your temptation has been to fix the jar of your child, to seal the small breaks before anyone else sees them, to do the work of the potter and the potter's helper at the same time, exhausting yourself trying to keep the small vessel looking intact. Set that load down. Your child's jar is not yours to repair. It is mine. Cracks you see appearing in the small life beside you are cracks I am already kneeling beside. Your job is not the seal. Your job is the witness. Stand close. Stay tender. Let the small jar know that no crack makes them unlovable in their own home. Pouring through the small life next to you will happen on my timeline, not yours. And it will go through exactly the openings you have been trying to close. For whichever one of you is reading these words from inside a season of abundance, stable income, peaceful house, body mostly cooperating, marriage mostly working, hear this also. Abundance is its own variety of jar, carrying its own variety of risk. A risk of abundance is a slow forgetting that the supply was ever mine. Vessels full for a long stretch begin to behave as if they themselves were the source of their filling. That is the season most prone to the slow, almost invisible drying out of a jar from inside. Stay tender with your cracks, even on days when nothing in your jar is currently breaking. Remember the brittleness beneath the calm. Keep the lid loose. Keep the rim honest. Abundance does not disqualify the lesson. Abundance is when the lesson gets forgotten with the most ease. Hear the mantra one more time on the way out, the way a friend repeats a true thing in the doorway. Where the cracks are, the light gets in. Where the cracks are, the love gets out. Carry that sentence with you for the rest of this week, the way you would carry a small lamp through a room you have been walking through in the dark. It is not a slogan. It is the truth about the vessel you are. Lean on it. Amen. If anything in this message reached the hollow place you have been hiding, leave the word "pour" in the comments below. Not as a tagline, but as a small flag set on the rim of a jar that has finally been told what it is. In the pinned spot above this video, you will find 7 brief letters already prepared. 1 to greet each of your next 7 mornings, sent into your inbox at the instant a quiet yes lifts the lid. Receive them. Forward this video to someone whose jar has felt too chipped lately to carry anything sacred. Hit subscribe so tomorrow's word reaches your counter before the shame finds the door first. This was never a road you were meant to walk with a sealed lid.